One of the parts of God that is so amazing, one of his attributes, is his everlasting nature. And the things about God that's everlasting is one of the greatest comforts we have, because we know that what God is, he always will be. Remember the song Amazing Grace. One of the verses says, "Through many dangers, toils, and snares I have already come. 'Tis grace that brought me safe thus far, and grace will lead me on." And I'm thankful today for that aspect of God, his amazing and everlasting grace. Ephesians 2:8-9 says, "For by grace are you saved through faith, and that not of yourselves. It is the gift of God." And truly today, we are blessed and kept by the grace of God. It's his grace that's brought us safe thus far, and it's God's grace that will lead us on. Ephesians chapter 2, verse 8-9 says, "For by grace are you saved through faith, and that not of yourself. It is the gift of God, not of works, lest any man should boast." Genesis 6:8 says, "But Noah found grace in the eyes of God." And that changed his whole life, and of course it changed the world, because he was somebody that God could use because he found grace in the eyes of God. I'm thankful today that wherever we are, whatever we're doing, we can find that part of God that is always going to reach out to us and surround us by his comfort. But Noah found grace. You know, foreknowledge is what this is about. God knew Noah's future potential. And we can change our future potential by binding ourselves to godly principles, because God already knows us. He knows our inside and out. He knows today. He knows about tomorrow. And so we can grasp a hold of that everlasting nature of God, and we can become forever changed, because all of God's attributes are everlasting. Everything about God is everlasting. He is our everlasting Father. Isaiah 9:6, it says that unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given, and the government shall be on his shoulder. His name shall be called Wonderful, Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. And so our forever God, who's always going to be the same, never ceases to be what he is, because what he is, he's always been, and he always will be. And the reason that this is so important is due to our constantly changing nature. We're up one day, down the next, and sideways one day, and on top of the world the next day. We can change due to circumstances, but God, he changes circumstances. And I think that's an awesome part about God. And every aspect of God's nature is unchanging. And what he is today, that's what he's always going to be. But he is our Father. Therefore, he imparts his divine elements unto us, and then we become what God needs us to be. I think that's amazing. God imparts those things to us so that we can surround ourselves with his comfort and his never-changing nature. There's a couple of scriptures I want to go to in 2 Samuel 16 and then 2 Samuel 19. And this is when David had his kingdom had been overthrown by Absalom. And verse 16 and 1 says, "David was a little past the top of the mountain, where Ziba, the servant of Mephibosheth, who met him with a couple of saddled donkeys, and on them 200 loaves of bread, 100 clusters of raisins, 100 summer fruits, and a skin of wine." Now, remember this, that David had showed kindness unto Mephibosheth. And so he called Mephibosheth's servant and said, I want you to, I'm going to bless him, and I'm going to give him his land back and restore everything to him that he had before. And so when Saul had left the kingdom, or had died in battle, and David became king, David wanted to give back to Mephibosheth, and the son of Saul. And he was the one that when they fled after the revolt, he fell and and broke his legs, and he was lame from that day forward. And so verse 2, the king said to Ziba, "What do you mean with these?" And Ziba said, "The donkeys are for the king's household to ride on, and the bread and the summer fruit for the young men to eat, and the wine for those who are faint in the wilderness to drink." And the king said, "Where is your master's son?" And Ziba said to the king, "Indeed, he is staying at Jerusalem, for he said, 'Today the house of Israel will restore the kingdom of my father to me.'" And now that wasn't true. That's not the nature of Mephibosheth. He was grateful for David to bestow such mercy on him after his father was killed in battle. So the king said to Ziba, because he's only hearing that one side, he said, Here, all that belongs to Mephibosheth is yours. And Ziba said, I humbly bow before you that I may find favor in your sight, my Lord, O king. And so he showed grace unto him. And then in 2 Samuel 19, now this is after the battle, Absalom has been slain, and now David is coming back home and with all of his men. And it says in 2 Samuel 19:24, now Mephibosheth, the son of Saul, came down to meet the king, and he had not cared for his feet, nor trimmed his mustache, nor washed his clothes from the day that the king departed until the day he returned in peace. So it was, when he came to Jerusalem to meet the king, that the king said to him, why did you not go with me, Mephibosheth? And he answered, my lord, O king, my servant deceived me. For your servant said, I will saddle a donkey for myself that I may ride on it and go to the king, because your servant is lame. And he has slandered your servant to my lord, O king. But my lord the king is like the angel of God. Therefore, do what is good in your own eyes. For all my father's house were but dead men before my lord the king. Yet you set your servant among those who eat at your own table. And remember, he had restored Mephibosheth to the same table that he had eaten at as a young man. And he said, you're going to eat with me from this day forward. So he said, therefore, what right have I still to cry out any more to the king? In other words, he said, you've already done enough for me. So I'm fine if you just let me live. And so the king said, why do you speak any more of your matters? I have said, you and Ziba, y'all divide the land. Now he could have given all the land back to Mephibosheth. But then Mephibosheth said to the king, rather let him take it all, inasmuch as my lord the king has come back in peace to his own house. Now we hear this story, and I think we can understand. We gather who was the righteous one, that Mephibosheth. He said, you can take the land back. I'm just glad that you didn't die in battle. I'm glad that the right man came out on top. See, they were both, Mephibosheth and Ziba, they were both at the mercy of David. So instead of judgment, David showed favor to both men. He could have easily have put Ziba in prison for lying and trying to trick David, but he said, I'm going to show mercy to both of these men and restore favor. He said, you just divide it between yourself. And I'm certain that from that day forward, Ziba probably realized David knew, and he had to live a very tight, controlled life without causing any more trouble. You know, one of them deserved it, and the other received it in spite of his nature. And really, that is mercy. And the grace of God, truly, that has brought us safe thus far, that's the grace of God that will lead us on. See, this was showing the grace of God that David's shown here, because he was a man after the very heart of God. I'm grateful today for what God has shown us and what he's doing. And I look around sometimes and I may be praying for somebody, and in my mind I'm thinking, you know, how did they get into this mess, or how did they turn that direction or this direction? Why can't they seem to do better, you know, for longer stretch of time? And then I wonder, Lord, where would I be without your grace? Where would we all be without the grace of God? I'm thankful today for that everlasting, wonderful nature of God's grace that has been bestowed on every one of us. I think that's something all of us, if we search our life, could be thankful for today.